You Beyond Leadership Roundtable. Today is Saturday, June 12th, and this virtual meeting is being live streamed on You Beyond's Facebook page. It will also be available for later viewing at our website and also on Facebook. My name is Yazan Doueri, and I will be moderating this session. I am Associate Professor of Vascular Surgery at Emory University, where I also serve as Quality Officer and Co-Director of the Emory Aortic Center. I'm also honored to serve as the new president of You Beyond. Many of you are familiar with You Beyond's mission, but some of you are, of course, new to our organization. You Beyond is a non-profit organization with a mission centered on providing underserved communities with the foundations of higher learning and career development. This is done through creation of professional networks and educational opportunities, all done through innovation and a community-based approach such as this event. Leadership development is at the core of You Beyond's mission, largely because it empowers both segments of the population that we are interested in, our mentors and our mentees. Joining me today in this roundtable about this important topic are three outstanding speakers representing a diverse leadership background. We have Mo Mustafa. He is chairman of the board of directors of You Beyond. He is now principal and advisor of Voyage Consulting. He currently provides consulting services in technology and telecommunication management, but previously has held many leadership positions in telecommunication, IT, energy, oil and gas, and retail. He's had an important leadership role in AT&T, including responsibilities in all aspects of engineering, operations, and maintenance. We also would like to welcome Hannah Inam. Hannah is a business leader, author, and an executive coach. She is a C-suite level executive coach and an independent board director and author of a new book titled Wired for Disruption. As the 20-year veteran of Fortune 500 companies, she has seen firsthand the pressures of being a leader at times of disruption. Her book details the importance of agility and how to be a force for good in times of disruption. And last but not least, we have Zina Latouf joining us from Boston. She's a founder of Hope Education Project. Zina is a Master of Public Policy from the prestigious Harvard Kennedy School. There, she studied negotiation, communication, and policy design, in addition to organizational leadership development. Prior to that, she has worked on refugee issues, education access, and nonprofit management. I am looking forward for an exciting and a fun exchange with our panelists about leadership topics. I also encourage our listeners to send your questions to our panel using Facebook comments. I will take those questions and present them to the speakers as we go. After this very long introduction, I think we're ready to go, right, speakers? Zina, I would love to kick off this meeting by asking you a very simple question. What are we talking about today? Why is leadership important? What does leadership mean to you?
Thanks for asking that, Yazan, and thank you everybody for having me here. So I think that my perspective of leadership is perhaps unique, and it's not really my own. So I went to the Harvard Kennedy School, and we have Ron Heifetz, who is sort of a big thinker on leadership. And the way he defines leadership is the ability to mobilize other people towards a common goal. And I think that is actually the definition that aligns most with where I feel like I've seen leadership and where it's resonated with me. So I'll sort of leave that there, and I'd be curious to hear from Hannah and Mo what their perspective is on leadership and this topic that we're talking about today.
So Hannah, is this what leadership means to you? I mean, you've obviously been a leader, but more importantly, you've advised executives and coached leaders in various organizations. Do you think that this is how really leaders perceive their roles?
Yeah. So good morning, everybody. From my perspective, I loved Zina's definition. I'm very familiar with Ron Heifetz's work. Indeed, he's a thought leader on this topic. The way that I defined leadership, and specifically authentic leadership, is about the fullest expression of me. So it's the fullest expression of me for the benefit of we. And for the benefit of we is about mobilizing others. But within leadership, one of the things that I feel very powerfully and kind of very strongly about is it is about the fullest expression of me. It has to start with who we are, who we're being in this moment. How do we leverage both what are our biggest strengths and passions and a sense of purpose in order to mobilize and make a difference in the communities that we're in? So I think that it's the combination of those two things.
Interesting. Mo, so you've obviously had various management and leadership roles, including some in one of the leading telecommunications companies in the world, AT&T, that is. You've also started out as an engineer, and I've known many engineers in my personal and professional life. You guys are all about technical excellence, knowledge, and lack of ambiguity. How would you tie mastering technical knowledge, that aspect of the organization, to actually leading a team, performing a task?
Yeah, first on the definition, I think that's right. The textbook definition is moving people towards. I like mobilizing better than moving, and I actually like motivating better than mobilizing and moving people to achieving a goal. So if you actually nitpick each one of these words, fear moves, it doesn't motivate. So, how you apply your leadership to others is critical. Achieving a goal, setting a goal and walking, motivating the people to go towards that goal is really kind of your classical definition of leadership. Now, goals, you can flush that out and say, well, what's a goal? A goal needs to be what, at least we used to refer to it, and I don't think this is an AT&T thing. I think it's a leadership common definition. They call it BHAGs. And the BHAGs are big, hairy, audacious goals, right? So it's not like I want to wake up in the morning. I don't want to have everybody wake up in the morning. You need to have a goal that is aspirational, right? It could be, I want to vaccinate 70% of the population by July. Okay, that's a specific SMART goal, to move towards it. I want to have a person on the moon by the turn of the century. So you look at this definition and you flush it out. Words actually matter in terms of what it really means. There are many characters for, and I'm sure we'll talk about this for leaders, that describes leader. Are they born? Is there a skill that is acquired? But to your point, the engineer and the biggest thing would be is how do you navigate through uncertainty, and not just you. How do you navigate people around you to go through ambiguous goals and so on? So there's a lot of characteristics that we'll probably talk about, but to me that was the biggest thing, is how your ability to build teams, and for those teams to follow you towards ambiguous things. And you mentioned a couple. The trust aspect is important. The communication is extremely important. And the respect that people have for leaders is important.
Mo, let me challenge you again on the topic of tying that knowledge to passion. And please, Zina and Hannah, feel free to give your thoughts. Does a leader of any mission have to master the knowledge about the actual technical details in that organization before leading it, or is passion enough by itself?
That's a good question, right? And I would answer that it's the degrees of knowledge, right? there's a book by Powell. I forgot the name of the book, but he says that, people asked him, it's like, how do you make your decision and how do you lead people? And I believe he said, that I make decisions 70% on gut and 30% on knowledge. And the further you go up in the organization, that percentage may change. So the closer you are to the source of information and decision making, it may be 70% knowledge and 30%. And that's where trust comes in. So as you go higher in the organization, that percentage changes. And the reason it changes is because you have already spent and invested time in your team to make sure that you have the trust and they're reliable, and that they've proven to you that they can. So you foster that environment where decision making is inherent into the culture of the organization, where you don't have to know, you don't have to be an autocratic leader where you actually have to know more than everybody else. And I would, stop me if I'm going too long on this, but leaders typically would, we have a saying in the corporate world that says 10 hire 9s, 9s hire 8s, 8s hire 7s. So if I'm hiring somebody, I want to hire a 10, right? Not fearing that I'm going to lose my job, right? But just imagine if I am a leader and I'm a 7 and I'm going to hire a 6. What kind of organization am I going to have with 6s, right? And I'm sure we'll talk, how do you measure the effectiveness of a leader later on, but you get the point.
So Hannah, let me turn this to you. Is this pyramidal way of thinking or a classic way of thinking in organizational management? And again, we're talking about senior positions largely, but this trickles down into the organization. Should they, if somebody's going to be a leader in an organization, should they master the knowledge of the people that they are leading?
Yeah, so I think that in terms of, I was just part of a board of directors conference this week, and there were 2,500 people from around the world that are boards of directors, and we talked a lot about what is the kind of leadership that is required now. As we all know, because of the pandemic and because of all of the disruptions that we are seeing, and the pandemic is one aspect of disruptions that has happened globally, but we're soon going to be faced and already faced with climate disruption, cybersecurity disruptions, political and geopolitical issues that are happening, right? So as a leader at the top of an organization, or even in the middle of the organization, we're constantly being faced with a lot of change. And so to me, knowledge of our subject matter is one aspect of how we lead. And of course, if we are in an accounting function, we need to have the competencies around, how to manage and lead in that context. But context is just one aspect of our leadership. Our leadership is also about how do we lead people. So we can be a fantastic accountant or a fantastic financial analyst and be at the top of our game in terms of the knowledge that we have. But in today's environment, more and more information and decision making needs to be distributed, right? So one person can't be sitting at the top of an organization and be making decisions. You have to count on people, because information is distributed, and access to information is closest to the people that are close to that information. As a leader, it's a lot about having the ability to figure out what are the critical things from a fit perspective. So as we sit on boards of directors, we try to think about what are the critical capabilities of a leader in this context. So in the context of an organization that's going through a lot of change, the kind of leader that we might need is somebody who is very adaptive, somebody who is very agile, somebody who has the ability to motivate and lead people to drive change inside of an organization rather than an autocratic leader who's just telling them what to do. So I think my sense is knowledge is one aspect of it, but leadership capabilities and capacities that are outside of knowledge are also really critical, particularly in this time that we're going through a lot of change. And so what do we know about each leader and their ability to be a good fit for the situation that they're leading in also becomes really important.
So, Zena, what I'm trying to get at here is, of course, the importance of leading from within and what skills any person who's aspiring to become a leader or even to implement change, how important it is for them to master the knowledge in order to motivate a team. What do you think of that?
So first thing I want to say, I love Henna's description of what leadership is. I wrote it down: the fullest expression of me for the benefit of we. So, and you asked the question, do we need expertise or passion? I actually am not sure if you need, I don't know if it's one or the other. I think expertise, like Henna just mentioned, is important. You have to know the content, you have to know the outfit that you're working with to make sure that you're functioning effectively. But also, Henna mentioned leading in adaptable, agile, high-changing environments. And I think that the skill that's really necessary there is humility. And how do you exercise humility? By asking questions and by engaging the team. Henna just mentioned, information is spread out across the entire company or the organization. Well, and if that's the case, then a single individual does not have all the answers. There may not be an answer, which is the interesting thing. It may just be, we have to continue to make interventions until we kind of reset our course to a more productive and meaningful path forward. And so is it expertise or is it a passion? Well, passion is important because it makes people excited and energized and, feel emotionally connected to the purpose. Expertise is important because you may actually know the answer to things that could be right or wrong in a more literal way. But when we're navigating change, where there's the past does no longer define the future, I think what's really important is the ability to ask questions, to listen to the team, to listen to what's happening in the world, and not to feel the need to have answers, but rather to engage all of the people involved so they feel that they are empowered to be part of the decision-making process. And I want to do a quick distinction. I think, it's natural to talk about leaders as people who are in charge, but those are people who have authority. And Henna may be, smirking because I'm also a student of a theory of leadership, right? So in theory, we say there are people who are in positions of authority and then people who exercise leadership. And we often assume that people who have the boss, the CEO, is going to be a leader, but that's not always the case. And leadership, as I think we're going to talk about in a bit, is about exercising it from within, right? So that's also engaging every person at every level of an organization, of a family, of a group of friends, whatever it is, towards leadership. So it doesn't only apply in the professional sphere, it applies in everyday life. I guess I think it's important to make that distinction.
So, Yazan, let me just trigger a couple of thoughts and go ahead, Henna.
Yeah, sorry, Mo. I really loved what the distinction that Zena drew, that I want to really double click on that and really emphasize that, because I think we all perceive ourselves, particularly young people, right, when they're not in positions of authority, that they cannot be leaders. And I love that distinction because leadership is truly about the fullest expression of me in any situation. So it could be in a family situation, it could be in a community situation. What you guys are doing, what Mo did when he created U Beyond, is an act of leadership, right? He was trying to serve a community to create better outcomes for them, right? Yazan, what you're doing right now in terms of volunteering your time for this conversation, that's an act of leadership. And so I don't want anybody to walk away, particularly young people, to walk away and believe that just because they're not in a position of authority or that they're not in a position where people are reporting to them. Some people also believe that you have to have people reporting to you in order for you to be a leader. I think it's so true that each one of us as human beings have the capacity and in fact the responsibility to be leaders in terms of, you know, fulfilling our potential. That's a deep human desire, is to be able to contribute to the people around you. In fact, what I wrote about in my latest book, Wired for Disruption, actually it's in our DNA. It's in our DNA to be able to be of help, to be able to be of service to the communities in which we belong.
Interesting. Well, Mo, this conversation, of course, will drive us to the topic of young people, and more importantly, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which has, of course, that topic has taken national prominence over the past year, obviously because of the highly publicized issues of social injustice in the U.S. And many organizations now have started to pay attention to these topics. But, I want to be clear, DEI has been at the core of UBeyond's mission since its inception by its founders, you, Dr. Omar Latouf, Dr. Hival Kelly. Can you elaborate how young individuals from underrepresented minorities can get leadership opportunities?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would say participating and getting engaged in nonprofits like this one, right, gives you a really great opportunity to develop, sharpen your leadership skills. One thing I would say that I think the statistic goes like 95% of leadership is really a taught skill, and only 5 to 10% is you're born with it. Right, so this actually can be an acquired, taught skill, and as you want to develop and sharpen leadership skills, not just in the corporate world, but if you don't have that opportunity, I think it was mentioned, that you don't have to be the boss to be a leader. This is a great fertile ground to show initiative, to develop and sharpen your leadership skills through serving the community, through coming up with initiatives, through helping refugees. Let's say in the case of, in Georgia, where we have Clarksville, right, you have a large refugee community there, and there's plenty of stuff to show your leadership skills. I mean, Zena probably can talk even better than me on some of the initiatives she did overseas. Those kinds of things lend themselves to developing leadership, because you go through the same stuff that that will help you become a leader.
So Zena, I'd like to get your perspective on this. My question is why it matters then, if it's not about being in a position of authority. And obviously for people who hear the word leadership initially, they think it's all about authority and managing others. As for UBeyond, our mission is all about our mentees, and these include, as you know, college students, high school students, or young professionals who need to expand their networks. And many would say that leadership positions and experiences are more relevant to a certain demographic, more senior members in the organization. Yet here we are, UBeyond, an organization that is focused on young people, discussing this topic and focusing on it. How important is it for young people to lead?
Thank you for asking that question. Obviously, I guess it's important, but I think the question really is, you asked Mo, how can young people get involved? And Mo said to engage, and then he finished the sentence, but it's really to be engaged, to ask questions, to be curious. So if I were to look back, I've worked for 3 years, then I went to graduate school. So I haven't had significant work experience, but if I were to look back into my past experiences, I wouldn't in the moment have known that I had done things that were leadership like, or leadership positions, or exercising leadership. I went to a Syrian refugee camp in college when I was in, and I did field work on the need for improved education. I guess that's leadership, right? I created a short documentary, and then it propelled me to be very interested in the refugee community in Atlanta or in Clarkston. And I started an organization called the Hope Education Project. But in that moment, it wasn't really about, oh, this is like a great opportunity, I can be a leader. It was just, oh, this is interesting. Well, there's a problem here, and I care about it. Or and I don't have a solution, but maybe I have an intervention. Let's bring some of the migrant youth in Georgia with some of the native Atlantan youth and see what happens. And that program existed for several years, and then COVID happened and we closed it down. And I'm now talking to the school that we partnered with because they want to bring it back. And I won't be involved because I'm in graduate school now and I have to find a full-time job and sort of be an employee for other people. But I think we're going to try to connect this school with another school that has a large migrant youth population. Hopefully something meaningful can come of it. So I guess that's another way to exercise leadership. I'm not involved. I'm not the head of anything. I'm not in charge, but I'm connecting people in a meaningful way. And so I draw this back to people who are in high school or in college. There was so much pressure when I was applying to college to put things on my resume that made me look like I had leadership experience. And it's natural, and that's important because it is important to have leadership experience. However, it's not about being the head of a service learning program or, to be the person that does Habitat for Humanity in Atlanta. It's about it's just about the process. And we live in a world where sometimes we have to write a resume and make ourselves look really good. But the reality is that if we live our life for the resume, it's not going to work out. But if we just do things that make us that we're interested in, and then we end up having to write a resume and we pull on our experiences, we're going to fill the resume with something and it's going to look fine. But that's not what it's all about. It's about who you are and how you carry yourself in those environments. So I guess I worked at a school also, so I felt the pressure was even greater for the youth that I worked with after I had graduated from college. If I were to give advice to people who are young in college and in high school, there will always be the pressure for the resume. There will always be the pressure for what internship do you have and how prestigious it is. But the truth is, if you do things that are interesting to you, and you may not, I don't know what my life is going to be. I had no idea what my life was going to be when I was in college. As long as you're doing things that are interesting to you and that you are engaging, as Mo said, I think there's a way that you will be exercising leadership without even knowing that you're doing that. And I think that's the most important part.
Very insightful. Beautiful. Thank you, Zina. Well, this is going very well. Again, I would encourage our listeners to send any questions they have using the Facebook comment section, and I will take those questions and put them to our speakers. Hannah, as we talk about all of this, I want to know how important is it for an organization to evaluate people's leadership skills, and I would like to talk about evaluating senior level managers and also evaluating junior employees and trainees and interns. How do you do that evaluation, and why do you do it?
Yeah, so I want to start off actually by emphasizing a point that Zina made. And what I love about that point is this notion that, we think that leadership is generic and it's just a skill that all of us need to just learn. And yes, there is an aspect of leadership that is all about skills and what we need to learn. And there is also an aspect of leadership that cannot be differentiated from who you are, right? So Zina said something very powerful, which is there are certain things that interest you. I spent 20 years of my career in, I started out, my degree was in finance. I went to go work for Procter & Gamble and Novartis. So 20 years of my career were spent primarily in running businesses. Finance, spent some time in marketing, general management, and sales. And what really, I had kind of an early midlife crisis when I turned 40. And I thought about, what is it that I really want to do when I grow up? ironically, it happened at a time when I was one of 10 people in a company of 90,000. Every year, our CEO would give out an award. And that year, my team and I was based in Mexico, was given that award. And I remember sitting on a plane from Basel, Switzerland, coming back to Mexico City, thinking, I should really be happy. And I was, of course, we got this wonderful award. I was picked one of 10 people. And yet there was something that was missing for me. And what was missing, I realized, was that I had been pursuing achievement and success on external standards of achievement and success. And what was missing was me. And so in this quest for leadership, my advice to everybody is you can't separate leadership from who you are and who you are being in this very moment. And the degree of engagement and passion and a sense of purpose and meaning that is uniquely yours, right? What uniquely inspires you. You can't separate that from the act of leadership, because the act of leadership is about the behavior, but it comes from a certain place, which is that place within you that is inspired to act in a certain way. Zena talked about it in terms of what interests her. So within each of you, there is a kernel, that is what interests you, the difference that you are inspired to make in the communities in which you're. So as you exercise leadership, don't forget that, because in my view, that is what's essential to your leadership. And so that didn't answer your question. Come back to your question.
Well, before you go back to my question, I think what you started is great. Following Zena's point, Mo, I'd like to hear your story. How did your quest for meaning in your career develop into an interest in leadership, or manifesting leadership in how you lead every day? Mo, you're muted.
I want to make a distinction between a manager and a leader, right? So a manager, you plan, organize, control, budget, and so on. Those are the things that a manager does, right? On the other side, there's the leader and the definition that we just talked about, and so on. There are skills required for that as well, right? So to me, one of the biggest aspects of leadership is and at least the leaders that I've seen extremely successful are those they've got this uncanny ability of critical thinking skills. You don't have to know everything, but you can actually connect dots that you don't have to be the smartest person in the room, but you have this ability for analysis and critical thinking that you provide insights and you connect the dots quickly, right? So, how did I manifest this? I actually worked for a utility, a power company, and I was 28 years old, right? And I really wanted to become a manager, right? And the manager, I just gave you a definition. The manager, you just, manage the stuff they give you. And I actually, at the time, at 28 years old, I had people who are 30 years my senior in a power company, right? And we were just, so disconnected, and so so one of the things that I learned very quickly is I really have to understand not just the analysis and the fact that I have to connect the dots that people are not BSing you and all of that, but also the human side of things and their needs and how those different generations think and so on. So I actually got stumped, right? So yeah, they took us through cycles of training and so on. But the real life, when you want to have things done, and people are looking at you like, well, what does this kid know about anything? I have forgotten more than you will ever learn, sort of stuff. And why would I even listen to you? So you have to have this, just like you have to learn leadership by fire. So you start getting all the help you need, right? Not just schooling, which I did, not just become a student of leadership, because this is really, it became a survival thing, right? And as I went longer and longer into it, I found that it actually is very fulfilling, actually, to accomplish those goals through others, right? And to move an organization to achieve things that it feels good once you say, here's how success looks like for everybody. The leader gets rewarded. One of the biggest things I would say that I always looked at as a badge of honor is when I saw people who achieved big things that came through my watch. And I've had people come under my watch, that became CEOs, that became very high up, and so on. And I look at that with great sense of pride, right? So developing leaders was one of the things that I looked at. So I had to learn by fire, right? Out of survival, right? And I had to have some organized structure around my thought process. I'll make a couple of points here. So we said there's a difference between a manager and a leader. There's also different types of leaders. And each situation requires perhaps different leadership style. So there are change leaders. You bring them into the organization to make change or the turnaround, right? There are leaders that can actually, take you to the next level, and they call them transformational leaders, right? So there's just two examples that there may be situational leadership that requires certain kind of people to initiate that change or transformation, and those leadership may have different attributes to your just normal, classical definition of what a leadership is. That was a long version to.
Interesting. Thank you. Well, Hannah, I'm going to take this back to you, because we had started asking about how whether someone is performing well on the job, particularly as it relates to the leadership skills. So why is it important for an organization to evaluate those kind of skills, and what do they do with such information?
Yeah. So what I would say is there is in any kind of a leadership situation, the first thing we do, so as a board member, a lot of times we're spending a lot of time thinking about the talent in the organization. And do we have the right talent in the organization to be able to accomplish what our longer term strategic goals are? Now, within planning for talent in the organization, what is really critical for us, and this goes back a little bit to what Mo was saying, is to understand what is actually required in this particular situation. So in the case of a CEO or a senior executive or even a junior executive, what are we trying to get done? Is this a situation that requires transformation? Do we need somebody who's going to be a fantastic change leader in this organization, because there is a burning platform and whatever we were doing before is not working. And so we need somebody who is going to come in and drive a lot of change. So typically in any succession planning, the first thing we have to do is identify what kind of leader is actually needed in this, and what are the top 3 things that we're looking for from that leadership situation. Then we evaluate those leaders. Typically, if they're from within the organization, we evaluate them based on the 360 feedback. So, generally, a lot of organizations have what they call 360 feedback mechanisms. So we will evaluate their bosses' feedback about them, their peers' feedback about them, and their direct reports' feedback. And a lot of times, people who are very good in terms of what we want to capture in the 360 feedback is lots of different perspectives on how this person exercises their leadership. They may be a fantastic people leader, but they may be very not as skilled in terms of managing relationships across the organization. And more is, particularly in large organizations, what's required is to be able to work very effectively with your peers, because no decisions are being made in a silo, right? And so if you're trying to drive change, it's about peer feedback. So feedback, first and foremost, on an individual. And I would really encourage actually everybody who's here, who's listening in, to see how are you capturing feedback? How are you learning more about yourself? Because as an executive coach, I know that we all have blind spots. There's a certain way in which we see ourselves, that others see us very differently. And so those are often our blind spots. And so a big practice of leadership is also, as part of leading yourself, you have to continually learn about how you're being effective in the eyes of others, because leadership is not a solitary, is not solitary work. You're always working within a system and a community to try to make change, any impact happen. And so capturing feedback and always being curious, as Zena was saying, about, how am I being effective? What are my strengths in this situation? And where are the areas that are my blind spots? Is being humble and being able to, talk to people and say, hey, help me out. I'm trying to learn more about my effectiveness. So I think that's critical as part of the learning about yourself. Within leadership, there is, how do I perform? How did I perform? Did I meet my BHAG goals, as Mo was talking about, big, hairy, audacious goals? But there is also potential. So a lot of times we're looking at, is this person performing? And then what is their runway in terms of, as we're doing succession and career planning for them, are they somebody who can be CEO one day because they have this innate capacity to learn? They're intensely curious. They're very good at managing within situations that are completely novel. You can put them in, sales one day and then in manufacturing another day, and they'll figure it out. Even though they're not a subject matter expert, they can figure out how to be effective and exercise leadership in multiple situations. So I think all those things are sort of ways in which we as leaders get evaluated and also evaluate others.
So, Zena, you've alluded to this a little before about the importance of leadership skills in order to identify your passion, grow your career, and also get into the study field of your choice. You mentioned the current value of adding little bullet points on the CV, but how are really employers and universities currently evaluating those leadership skills in job applicants or student applicants outside of just looking at the bullet points?
That's a great question. I'm in the job search now, so I guess I could speak about my experience and how I'm being received. But I do want to make a quick note. You said identifying passion. And I think there's a lot of pressure that many people, any level of experience, any age, but especially people who are in school, high school, college, graduate school, feel, what is my passion? Who am I? I just want to, I want to say it's important that people, my attitude is, we don't have to have a single passion and we don't have to have a purpose. We will find our purpose someday. We may actually be doing it without knowing the name of it. I believe that I'm doing it, that I don't know what the name of my purpose is, but I feel very satisfied with how I make my decisions. So I think it's happening, but I don't know what it is. I could maybe explain it to somebody, but it would be kind of one of those big, like, this is what I'm interested in, this is how it connects to these other things, but I feel good about it. So I just want to mention, I think it's important, and I'm not about identifying passion, but doing what you're interested in, because that'll take somebody through a very maybe a linear path, kind of a windy course, to something that maybe is their purpose, or the whole way through it was their purpose and we just didn't know the name of it. So again, kind of back to that interest thing. Then your question about how how are graduate schools, how are jobs, what are they looking for in leaders, or what are the things that seem to be particularly sticky? Truly, I don't know the answer, but my hunch is humility. We've talked about the capacity to be curious, to ask questions. Hannah talked about taking feedback. Like, feedback is a very difficult thing to receive and then to act on. And it's not easy to be able to tell if somebody is the type of person that can receive feedback or does not do a good job receiving feedback. But I think that is a very important quality for me as I'm going through this process. I'm constantly asking for feedback, and something I've learned about myself is I ask for it. It's something that I have to really process it, right? So I'm excited to get the feedback. It's not always something that I'm excited to process and think about, but it's important. I think one of the things that employers are really looking for, is, at least maybe the employers that I'm working with, is the ability to have somebody used the word gravitas recently, but the gravitas, or the capacity to speak with confidence or with agency with individuals that are more senior than ourselves, all of us who are more junior than other people. So it's, being able to help people in positions of higher authority read weak signals. So sometimes, one of the key reasons why I came to graduate school was actually because in my previous job, I was asked to launch a program in a very severely underserved community. And I was the yes person. I was the most junior person in the room, felt very uncomfortable naming my concerns. And I was really upset about the way the situation happened afterwards, because I knew I had a gut feeling that things weren't going to work out. And I did not have the confidence to say, can we talk about this for a little bit longer? Can I ask you some more questions? How are we going to move the needle with a program that only meets students 3 hours a week? So I think that what employers are looking for is for young people to have the agency, or for anybody really to have the agency to respectfully communicate their questions or concerns in a way that can actually lead to a more valuable path forward. That to me has been the most meaningful. But I'm obviously curious what Hannah and Mo have to say from perhaps a different perspective.
So Mo, that's a very important topic. Feedback. It's a gift in many ways, but it can be a difficult gift to give and process. So can you tell us a little bit about how you give feedback to people, and more importantly, how do you receive feedback in a positive way?
The 360 instrument is extremely effective, as Hannah was saying. So, I've been a recipient of it. I have been a participant in it, and it's just what you just said. It's a gift. So as long as you look at it as a gift, and to Zina's point, you try to process it. Process the good and the bad. The thing that with about 360 is people kind of, you have to go 360, your boss, your peers, and your subordinate. And what people do most of the time is they actually choose people that are safe and they know they're going to say good things about them. And that kind of defeats the purpose, right? So you actually have to put yourself out there. So it's like bearing your soul. You're trying to really improve. And I think Hannah mentioned that you're trying to clear those blind spots that you don't see, and people are trying to tell you what your blind spots are. And if you kind of refuse that, you're leaving a lot out, right? So 360 is a good tool. I would add a couple of more things, right? So I think Hannah articulated, the measurement of success, business results, and so on very well. I would probably add a couple more things. Customer assessment is important as well, right? So what do your customers think of you and your organization and so on, or you in general, right? So customer is important. The other piece is, how effective are you in developing others and developing other leaders, right? And the third thing, which kind of relates to 360, and we got to use this carefully, is an instrument of your personal dimensions. Understanding yourself. Myers-Briggs would be one instrument. Understanding your people is extremely important. And I would use it only in that sense. There are some people that use it for employment, which I am anti that very strongly. You just use it to understand your team and understand yourself. So understanding yourself and understanding your team through some of these instruments, in addition to the 360, to know, the differences of thinking and so on, and surrounding yourself with people that are not like mind of yourself is really is important.
So, how do you deliver negative feedback? And the reason this is important is because we've all been recipients of this, and it's important to know how senior management would deliver this to somebody, and how they expect that person to react.
Yeah. So I think I'll share a quick story about me recognizing my own, getting 360 feedback. So the first thing I will say is receiving feedback is hard. It was for me. I remember I was a general manager in Mexico. So this was, the same situation where, our team had been awarded and was recognized as one of the top in the company. And I remember asking for and getting 360 feedback. And, it was the 360 instrument. And what I got from my team is that I was a complete control freak, that I was trying to do too much controlling. And it was a good thing. I mean, I got that feedback, and we were in an offsite. So I had a 2-hour drive back to the office. And I remember being so disappointed, disappointed in them, disappointed in myself, angry, like, how could that be true? That's not true at all. Justifying to myself, no, that's never true. Picking all of the examples where I was never a control freak. And so part of the thing when you're receiving feedback is you have to manage yourself. You have to let yourself go through those reactions, So it's a good thing I had a 2-hour period to, it's kind of the stages of death, right? Like you're denying it and then you finally accept it. So I think for me, that was kind of a really hard experience of receiving feedback. And then you realize, like, there's always a kernel of truth in this feedback, and you get to a point of accepting it. Now I am in the enviable position of delivering feedback. So as an executive coach, often to CEOs and very high-powered leaders, the higher up that you're in a hierarchy, the more your sense of ego is. Like, obviously you're good, right? Because you've gotten there. And so it's very hard for some of these people to accept feedback. And so, as an executive coach, my job is to speak truth to the emperor, right? Who has no clothes, to let them know, hey, you have no clothes. And so it's so critical. The most important way to deliver negative feedback is first and foremost to let the person know that you care about them, that this feedback is indeed, as hard as it is to receive feedback, and it is also hard to give feedback. The critical part of that is the level of trust that is in the relationship. And so as a manager, if you're giving feedback to your people, or what is even tougher, and this is what Zina was talking about, this sense of gravitas, or the ability to speak truth to power. They call it speaking truth to power, which is so important for young people, for anybody, even at higher levels in the organization. CEOs need to be able to speak truth to power to their boards. To be able to speak truth to power, what is absolutely critical is the quality of the relationship, the greater trust, caring, absolute credibility that you have with one another. And what I would say is, in trust, I mean vulnerability-based trust. that you can have with one another, to say, I really care about you as a person, and this is the reason why I'm delivering you this message, which is hard for me to deliver and hard for you to take, but it's because I care about you, the person. I think the more we can get to those places, and as a coach, that is what's absolutely critical. For the other person to be able to even listen to the feedback from you. Because it's one thing to deliver the feedback, but if you deliver it like, it's kind of like you're going to the dentist, it's going to be really painful. The person's going to be numb, they're not going to listen. And so the absolute having that sense of safety, to be making sure that even the person is open to listening to the feedback is so important.
Yes, and if I could add one more thing on the giving feedback, and I think both Hannah and Mo are making like really, really good pieces that are sort of listing some of my own thoughts. So, Hannah's saying about like having a safe environment. Oftentimes feedback can be really hostile, or it can be received poorly because, for example, a couple of weeks ago, one of my siblings told me that I was so selfish. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm selfish? I've changed the plan 7 times with our family because of you and your children and all of your schedules, and I'm trying to coordinate nap time. So I'm not selfish. I'm actually just changing the schedule 16 times because of this, right? So I had a complete emotional reaction, which I think Hannah was sort of, and I needed time to reset and respond. But I think that the flaw with feedback that says you're so selfish or you are this is that it's very vague. It's not clear. And I think the better way to give feedback, and this isn't my own, I didn't invent this, but I learned this recently and I want to share it here because I thought it was really insightful, is to act like a camera. So instead of making an assumption and a value judgment about who that person is or what that person is, to rewind the camera and to explain what happened. So the way that could have been delivered is, instead of you're so selfish, Zena, you changed the schedule 4 times in 1 hour. And that's really difficult for me to be able to manage with everybody that I'm trying to coordinate. Right? So it's acting like a camera and removing the opinions, removing the vague words, removing all of the other the assumptions, and rather just saying, this is what happened. I'm going to replay and tell you, in between 9 and 10 a.m., you said we were going to do this, then this, then this, then this. And that is 4 changes. And to me, I perceive that as not thinking about the rest of the family, et cetera. So this is one example where it could be applied. But that's one way when we say creating a safe environment, creating trust. It's not about a value judgment. It's not about who a person is or what they are. It's saying we're trying to work towards a common goal. And I want to tell you how what happened was not helpful for our common goal. So I kind of want to just put that piece in as an actionable item for people who are looking to give feedback, acting like a camera and replaying this exactly what happened without the emotions and the sort of vague words. Thank you.
Looking at it objectively. Well, we are almost done with the full hour, and this has been an extremely interesting and exciting conversation. Would everybody say that we talked about everything that's important in leadership? And over this hour, I will let each of you give a few final remarks as we finish up. Mo, the mic is yours.
Yeah, just a couple of points. I think we may be sharing with the folks who attended today some books and resources that you can go and refer to. And I think take those, as really kind of additional gifts, if you will, that we would like, as UBeyond, share with the participants. While we're on the topic of feedback, I'll just kind of comment quickly on that. If you look at us as 4 quadratures, with Yazan being the first one, there are things called eyes wide open. It's what I know about you and you know about me. So yeah, if I gave you feedback, you're actually confirming what we both know. If we move to the right with Zena, let's say, they call it a disclosure. I wouldn't know something about Zena until Zena tells me about her. So it's a disclosure. And then we can talk about feedback. If we move to the Hannah quadrature, would be what we call blind spot, right? So a blind spot would be she doesn't know, but I know, and feedback is really designed for me to tell Hannah kind of what I see, right? She doesn't see it, so feedback is for me to kind of get sort of that feedback back, right? As whether it's real or not. I mean, as I see it, she doesn't see it. It's blind spot. The disaster is where I am in my quadrature, which is called fatal flaw, right? And a fatal flaw is I don't see it, you don't see it, and you are failing and going down in a hurry, and you just don't know why. People don't see it about you, but you have a fatal flaw of some sort. So you really, there's a lot of things that get you into, you need to be aware of all of these things and instruments, right, that will get you to a point where you appreciate some of the things that we're talking about, through the hour. I would really encourage everybody to kind of take those resources that we're sharing with you to heart and try to pick up on some of this stuff.
Thank you, Mo. Hannah, any final words? Please tell us also about Wired for Disruption.
So, what I wanted to reflect on what Mo was saying, I think it's a wonderful framework. And what I would add to that is that a fatal flaw is another learning opportunity and a growth opportunity. It's never fatal. It's never fatal until the end, So take something where you failed and use this as a learning opportunity. Because the more, life is just a journey of a series of learning opportunities. And so take that. Wired for Disruption is a wonderful book, in my opinion. And it's actually talks about the 5 shifts in agility that we need to make as leaders in order to thrive in the future of work. There's also a podcast. It's called the Transformational Leadership Podcast with Hannah Anam. And I'm interviewing a wonderful transformational, inspirational leaders, sort of like Yazan did. So I get to be in the easy seat and talk to fantastic people. So please check the podcast out. And my other book is called Wired for Authenticity, and it's about how can we be more authentic in our leadership. So would love to stay connected. Please connect with me on LinkedIn if you would like. And this has been a wonderful opportunity to learn from my colleagues here. And thank you, Yazan.
Thank you, Hannah. Zina, you get to close it.
Thank you. So I have two pieces of, I guess, things I reflect on. Everybody says have mentors, and that's really important. And I think it's tough to say, like, how am I going to find a mentor? So the way I think I would reframe it is to be comfortable asking for help and asking questions for people who may know more about something that we don't. And then the second one I want to really emphasize is to find confidants. And these are people who we are comfortable being incredibly uncomfortable and vulnerable with, and to ask for feedback about things that we may not really receive from other people who we are less comfortable and who are less comfortable around us. And I think that is something that I'm realizing as I'm graduating from graduate school is really helping me sort of find myself and stay confident and just be able to hold steady in the most uncomfortable times of my life as I'm trying to manage change, etc. And I also want to say, Yazan, thank you, Mo, Hannah. This has been a lot of fun, and hopefully this can be useful to some other people.
Thank you. This has been a wonderful hour. I encourage all our listeners to use this as a free resource to develop your own knowledge about leadership. And also, please visit our website, UBeyond, and visit our Facebook page for other learning opportunities. This has been great. This is the first in our leadership series, and more to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you.